You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 221, Incubus, hosted by Dan Terry.
Not that we are out to be controversial, but seems unavoidable at this point.
John Beatty.
Oh, wait, you're going to put a 10-minute long song to end the album? Oh my god, that's great. You should do that, totally.
And Joseph Wren. I don't like this album.
Final thoughts?
And Joe comes in hot.
Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you think every shade of green is your favorite color, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. That is John.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Discography Discussion on YouTube. And, also on audio podcasts and stuff. It really depends on you, my friends.
Where can they find that audio podcast?
Oh, well, they can hear that at discussmetal.com, Joe. One of the coolest things about Nu Metal May is we get to talk about bands that are a huge variety. Nu metal is one of those genres that, as we talked about in previous episodes this month, you can't really put a pin on some of these bands. So I thought that this would be a really good month to talk about Incubus, because this band is all over the sound map.
But they're not nu metal, dude.
They can be. A lot of these bands. We talked about E-Town Concrete last week. And those guys weren't really nu metal either. So apparently the biggest theme I'm seeing, besides the Linkin Park episode that we did, is that, basically if it has funk guitar in it, then we're like, oh, that's nu metal, right?
Well, if you get scientific, then, yeah, I guess that's one of the qualifications of nu metal. So I'll let you have it for now. You can't have it later, though.
Those light grenades out, Joe.
Oh, shit.
They get very scientific, at one point. So we've got that going for us. Thank you guys for checking this out. This is a lot of fun. So let's get into it. Or do you want to read some comments or something first? Probably get that out of the way first. I like to make people wait a solid 30 minutes.
Let's do that. I want you to read some comments on this podcast, Dan.
All right, I'll read some comments. I'm excited about these. So I'm going to start with one that, I feel like needs to be read. This is from Ivy Kuhn. And he goes, I swear to fucking God, if the next episode isn't Scars on Broadway, I'm unsubscribing. I'm tired of all these shitty bands that sound the fucking same. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but as you probably already know, the next episode was not Scars on Broadway. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, but I think that the last few bands that we've talked about on the show have sounded vastly different from one another. That's just my opinion. And I'm not here to slam you. It just sounds like maybe you're into a different kind of music than maybe the predominant type of music that we talk about on this show. But we do have a lot of variety in the bands that we talk about.
We're on episode 221. We have variety.
I mean, we did an NF episode. We did an episode on The Offspring. We did one on Dead Z. We've done a lot of different types of sounding bands on this podcast. So, but you can't please everybody. So if you're still listening, then great. If not, that's okay.
Unpleasable
it's okay
metal
for
fan?
everybody to have different tastes. On a more interesting note, we got a tweet from Joel Bailey. He goes, "Hey guys, it's Joel from Society's Finest. Came across your podcast where you discuss the band. Definitely appreciate your honesty in reviewing and discussing the band and our albums. If you want any background stories about the songs or albums, hit me up." Which, I definitely did. So hopefully by the time you're hearing this, you'll have already heard my talk with him. In reference to episode 217, Cephalic Carnage, Phoenix says, really appreciated hearing at Jeff with a Q's voice again. Nice discussion, my dudes.
Hey, y'all.
Yeah, we had Jeff on there. John was out of town saving the world. And so we had to pull Jeff in. We had to open up the box and let him out, breathe and feed him and, let him use the bathroom and stuff. And then he was ready to talk about some Cephalic Carnage.
Well, before Dan becomes a hot dancer, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at discussmetal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Hey, we love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion. Leave us a review anywhere that you can leave us a review. And share the episodes. Share the episodes with your friends, your family, your grandparents. Anybody that you think you might actually get triggered by some of the things that we have to say here. Not that we are out to be controversial, but it seems unavoidable at this point. So here we are.
It's time, Dan. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about the bus, the Incubus.
So, Dan, tell me about Incubus for the 1057th time. Yes, that was a 1057 pun. Go!
Well, I don't think it's any kind of secret that I've been listening to Incubus since my formative years. And I think that's part of the reason why my musical tastes are as weird as they are sometimes. Because Incubus, well, they were a rock band that started around 1991. And to even call them a rock band, that description has to be based more on their most recent material, more so than their old material. Because if you go back far enough, you find a rock band, you find a slightly harder rock band. You go further back, you find like this kind of new metal band. You go even further back, and you're in like pure like funk rock, Red Hot Chili Peppers worship territory.
1995, Fungus Among Us.
Oh my gosh, Fungus Among Us. I mean, I have to show you this because it's just, I mean, this says it all. You know, it's a gigantic mushroom. And if I've never seen a cover for an album better represent what you're actually hearing on the album than this picture. So obviously this is Incubus's like first like official, and I wouldn't even say official album because I think a lot of people would say that their first official album was S.C.I.E.N.C.E. But Fungus Among Us is all the kind of stuff that existed pre-S.C.I.E.N.C.E, you know. And let me tell you, it's
Don't you make fun of me, dude.
Yeah, I don't even know how to describe this with the terms that I usually use to describe albums. It starts off with one of my favorite songs of all time called You Will Be a Hot Dancer. And this is, I mean, if I had to compare it to anything, I would say it sounds a little Chili Peppers-ish. You know, you've got the funky bass. You've got kind of this weird, punky, you know, I don't even say it's a rapped delivery. It's not really rapping, but it's this weird rhythmic, like the vocalist is dropping all of his enunciation right on the bass line. It's like it's a vocal tablature of some type. And the lyrics are balls out insane. I mean, we're talking, you know, there's a guy, he's going to be a hot dancer. They're at a club. I think it might be a club for gentlemen. And these gentlemen want nothing more than to get other gentlemen to get out of their clothes and dance, preferably on stage. Either that or this is taking place in an insane asylum where Brandon Boyd thinks this is happening after he took the brown acid at Woodstock. This is insane music. The way the vocals switch from this like weird swing jazz sort of style into just him just screaming, "Don't you make fun of me! Don't you make fun!" I mean, it's just, it's a lot to take in. All at once. And if you think that that's just a weird oddity that they decided to, you know, that they decided to just throw on there, you'd be wrong about that. I mean, you'd be dead wrong.
Oh, dude, anytime I listen to Incubus, I end up coming back to Fungus Among Us. And I agree, it's really hard to talk about this record in any normal context for this podcast. I think you're going to have a lot easier time going back and explaining what you think about Fungus Among Us when we talk about Deep Inside on S.C.I.E.N.C.E, because S.C.I.E.N.C.E is a masterpiece of 1997. We're just not quite there yet. You go from You Will Be a Hot Dancer to Shaft. I'd like to point out there are 11 tracks on this album. And what are you thinking when I say Shaft? You're thinking of that song from the 70s about a man who is the man, right?
He's a bad mother.
Shut your mouth, John.
All right, I'll allow it. But I was only talking about Shaft.
Oh, you're gonna fucking dig it because Incubus is talking about Shaft too. They're just not doing it the same way as everybody else. Hardcore funk rock, what people think the Red Hot Chili Peppers sounded like in the 90s. Explosion. Just onslaught of intensity and energy and weird sounding guitars. It's funky as hell, and Brandon Boyd is just doing that thing that Brandon Boyd did in the first 5 years of this discography. Just wail and then bark. And that's only track 2.
It's weird that this band even got signed, in the sense that, like, it's not that this music isn't compelling. It's very compelling. But there was no way any of this was made with any sort of, like, mainstream aspirations in mind. I think these guys really liked the Chili Peppers. I think they also really liked drugs. And that's really how you get a record like Fungus Among Us, where it takes everything that was popular at the time and just puts them in this blender and then adds a whole bunch of LSD to the blender. And it is an experience that really has to be heard. It can't really be described. What do you think of Fungus Among Us, John?
It sounds like the byproduct of really being into Primus and maybe like some jammy band like Fish or something to me. And then just, like you said, throw a bunch of drugs at it. And somewhere in there is the truth, I'm sure, as they would say. It's a great record. I mean, it was so good they released it twice. Because it was Enjoy Incubus and then Fungus Among Us, or do I got those switched around?
I think it was Fungus Among Us first, and then
Enjoy Incubus.
And then it was re-released once the band got popular as Fungus Among Us. I also love in the liner notes too how he's like, yeah, this is our earliest material. Really hope you guys like it. If you don't like it, well, fuck you. We got your $10. So
I did see that they put out a 2-song EP, like before even this.
Yeah, and I haven't heard that. That's one of those things that I would love to just get my hands on, like an actual copy of it. But
spoilers,
unless
everybody.
I run into
Dan
Brandon
is
Boyd
like
at
the ultimate Incubus fan. Like, he wants to do 20 minutes on just When Incubus Attacks, and that record isn't even 20 minutes long.
Well, we can't have another 2-hour episode like we had with Linkin Park. We gotta move this along.
Let me get us to that point, because I know what we're all waiting for.
We need to redefine what we're gonna do here.
1997 Science.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah.
This is the best album by this band, I'll say it. It is not the most popular album by this band, but for me, knowing where the discography starts, knowing where it goes, knowing what got the most popular and what is still played on the radio to this day, you can't listen to Science and not want more of this. And they kind of give that to you on Morning View and Make Yourself, but it never got this funky ever again.
Well, I certainly think that Fungus Among Us was funkier than this, but this is what happens when you give the band that recorded Fungus Among Us a budget. And you have a little bit of mainstreamizing of the band in that they take the insane jazz funk music, that fusion. They take all of that and they have it in the blender with the copious amounts of LSD. But they've made sure that, between that, there's still some sort of recognizable chorus on a lot of these songs, which really capitalizes on Brandon Boyd's like smooth, like melodic singing voice. He's a really good guy that can shout melodically, and he's smooth. He really is a smooth singer at heart. And I appreciate that there's more of him singing on this record than on Fungus Among Us, because I really like his voice. And but it's fun seeing all the weird stuff that they do on this record, because this might be a little bit more of a mainstreamized Incubus, but it's not much. Songs like New Skin are ridiculous. And like even once you get through songs like Idiot Box, Vitamin, Redefine, Magic Medicine is where things really take a weird turn. Where it's literally just like it's
a trip hop beat.
It's a trip hoppy type of song. Lots of record scratch, record pop on there. And it's somebody reading out of a children's book. It's like, on this page, we see a little girl giggling at a hippopotamus. I wonder why. And then for the rest of the song, you're going to wonder why, because they never tell you why. At one point, he's like, I found something in the house one day. If you don't claim it, I'll give it away. And it's I don't know, it's terrifying. And I don't know if this 100%, but I feel like there's some softcore porn samples thrown in there at random parts of the song. Either that, or they've just mixed these sound samples to sound like softcore porn. But it's definitely weird. I would say like this is where the album kind of, for me, starts to kind of go off the rails a little bit, because like you get a certain shade of green, which is more like the first, certain shade of green and favorite things are more like what you heard on the first half of the album. Once you get to Nebula, everything goes nuts. There are no more normal songs on this album after Summer Romance. Nebula starts off annoyingly enough with just the sound of like car horns, and it sounds like you're in a. It sounds like you're just like in a traffic jam with somebody playing Incubus like really far away. And when the band comes in, I mean, it just goes ridiculous. I can't even explain it. Like whispering, weird screaming, outrageously strange jazz moments interspersed throughout. It is an absolute trip. And if you think that Deep Inside is going to let up on you, it's not at all.
It lets up just a little bit. Deep Inside is the most pure funk that Incubus has put into a song that is primarily jazz influenced, but they still have the PSs at the end of the verses that function as one-line choruses, where they just turn everything on and see what it sounds like. Deep Inside is the song that might help explain what's going on in Fungus Among Us from an enjoyment perspective. John, you got anything you want to throw in before we talk about Calgon?
I mean, that's actually a song I'm listening to in my headphones right now.
Same.
This feels like... So what's interesting about this, and I always kind of have wondered this about Incubus, at least this record. So we had 2 EPs, basically, that started the band's career. I wonder if basically from a certain shade of green down the rest of the record, if that was kind of what they were working on. And then a label was like, hey, we want a full length. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we had been working on these other songs to go to a recording studio and then basically redefine until kind of Magic Medicine is kind of the newer material out of the collection. And then it was like, okay, now we have a full record that, gets to the criteria of it has this many songs, it's this amount of length that, is written into record contracts where they expect certain things. Because, yeah, like Dan said, it feels like 2 weird halves. I think they did a good job of at least putting the material that sounds the same with each other instead of trying to blend these, because that would have been even weirder. But maybe it's some weird intellectual thing of like, well, that's what science is. It's all these different parts coming together and, cohesive bonding and all this kind of crazy shit. This sounds, especially in this iteration of the band, the records we just talked about in this one, this feels like the band that I would go see jam on a Tuesday. It was called the Tuesday Jam House. We'd go every Tuesday. Like the same 6 people would get together and they'd switch instruments and they'd play and they jam. Sometimes they'd play a cover. Sometimes they'd play something. And sometimes that music that they were working on was kind of cool. And then it would go away. And then you're like, what the fuck is this? This feels like a band that didn't have any one sound. They just, whatever felt good to them is what you're hearing. And sometimes it's a lot of fun. Sometimes you're just kind of like, like Dan said with, what was it, Nebula? Where you're just kind of like, that's a thing you're doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is one of those where I kind of agree with Dan. Like I could, I do kind of wonder how a band like this gets signed, but at the same time, you hear a song like New Skin and you're almost like, okay, like I could see this band playing with like a Sepultura, oddly. It has that kind of Latin-y thing that was kind of permeating into the music at the time. But like, again, sort of like I said with Linkin Park, you get a band of young looking dudes who have a really good looking frontman. And maybe that's a good selling point that a label will look at and go, hey, you know what? The package of this works. You're weird. You're a great musician. So musicians will like you. The women will like you because you have good songs that kind of appeal to them. And
very showable abs.
Yeah. And, your frontman still is considered a sex pot. So, yeah, everything works on paper. Let's sign this and see what happens.
And then what happens is they show up and they're like, guys, we got a great song to show you guys that I think should be the lead-off single of the album. It's called Calgon. And then the record exec listens to it and is like really flashing back to the mid 60s whenever Quaaludes like really worked.
The good ones?
Yeah. And so, he's like, I'm not really sure what happened. Did I just have a flashback? And now I'm just like, did I miss the song? And then he listens to it again. He's like, oh, wow. Okay. This is the song.
Oh, wait, you're going to put a 10-minute long song to end the album? Oh my God. That's great. You should do that. Totally.
Calgon is the reason I like the more unknown Incubus. Just this onslaught of overly distorted energy and yet they can still back off and play cleaner than anybody. This is a band that has a very much jazz, funk, rock influenced guitarist. The bass is always funky. Even when they got a new bass player on A Crow Left of the Murder, it still sounds like Incubus. One of the best drummers, one of the most interesting sounding DJs who contributes to the song much more like DJ Lethal. I like Mr. Hahn, but like we talked about Linkin Park, Mr. Hahn kind of just sets the scape sometimes. He doesn't actually play the music, not the same way this band does.
You're referencing a completely different DJ on these records, though.
It still works, though.
It does, but it's used in a completely different medium than you'll see moving forward from S.C.I.E.N.C.E on. You had DJ Light, and he was using more of samples and so forth to kind of create, I don't want to say an accompaniment necessarily, but it's the way he uses his samples and the way that the band sounds, it was totally more of a funk kind of, I don't want to say avant-garde kind of thing, but when they end up getting DJ Killamore on Make Yourself moving forward, he becomes more of what Frank does in Deftones, where it's creating more of actual textures and sonics that accompany the music that they're making versus kind of being almost a stark contrast to what's being played.
And no, man, then there's Make Yourself. Is it time?
Well, no, not yet. I hadn't got to talk about Calgon enough. So Calgon is, well, it's going to seg into Make Yourself. But Calgon's interesting because, like, apparently it's a bad acid trip, right? Like, you're being abducted by aliens. They're going to put cold things in your butt. They're going to summon you up and take your DNA, all this stuff or whatever. And the song just it starts off slow, kind of lucid, goes completely crazy after about a minute or so. But what I think is really notable about Calgon is as insane as this song is, and I'm not going to talk about the 10 minutes of crap that's just after that.
Segue.
I mean, it's definitely worth listening to, but yeah, it's just garbage. But Calgon's interesting because at the 2 minutes and 10 second mark of Calgon, he goes into this. Brandon goes into this smooth section. It's only like 5 or 6 seconds of him just singing smoothly, and there's like this weird like existential guitar playing going, sampled drums kind of going on underneath it. And that preview right there, that 6 seconds is what the entire Make Yourself album sounds like.
1999, the mainstream radio powerhouse that is Make Yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong, historically this is not the most popular Incubus album, but it is in St. Louis.
Yeah, whenever they were on tour for, I think it was Light Grenades here in St. Louis, they showed up and played most of Make Yourself, and then like 2 or 3 songs off Light Grenades, and then they like, all right, see you guys later. See you next year.
Oh, dude, is that the show where they played Let's Go Crazy, Let's Get Nuts?
Yeah.
And it was actually really good?
Yeah. Yeah, not bad at all. Make Yourself, so you know how I said Science was like Incubus with a budget? This album is Incubus with a producer. Like, I'm sure there was a producer on Science. I just don't remember who it is off the top of my head. But Make Yourself is like, okay, you know, lead singer, great looking dude. Lots of female listeners will check it out. But I don't know that many people that are going to just buy Science and listen to it and be like, this is great. Because you got songs like Calgon and Nebula, and they're like, we want to capitalize on your guys' more mainstream sensibilities. And we want you guys to put a record out that's like going to actually be listenable for most people. And, because like, yeah, you look at guys like me and Joe and John, and we're kind of up for anything, a lot of the time. But I feel like your average consumer, they're going to hear a certain shade of green, and then they're going to buy Science, and they're going to be like, what is this? I can't. Like,
it's like when you heard Death Blooms for the first time and Dig, and then you said, I'm going to go buy that Mudvayne record, and then you got it home, and all that random shit happens in the middle.
Yep. It's just like that. And so Make Yourself, I think they set out from day one to make a more mainstream record. But what I like about it is that a lot of the elements that are on Science are still here, but they're subdued and they're used much more intentionally. It's not so much anymore, let's see what kind of random thing we can throw in to throw you off. It's more like, how can we use these sound effects and these other influences to enhance the power of the verses, the power of the choruses. And it's mixed together so well. And the only times that I really see the old school Incubus on this record, like in full form, is on what most people would call a throwaway track, although it's not for me, which is Battlestar Scrala Tech Chilicata or whatever. I don't know how to
Scratch-tacula.
Scratch attack. No, it doesn't. No, there's no L at the end of it, so it's not la. It's no. We're gonna figure this out right now. Okay. Battlestar Scaralactica.
There you go. Good enough.
All right, I like it. That's just me sounding it out. But this is the most. It's like they're like, we're gonna give you guys 4 minutes, and we're gonna let you do the thing that makes you guys happy, and you end up with this like really smooth, funky, scratchy track, which I love quite a bit. This is also where Incubus has no problem giving you like kind of more sappy, whiny songs, which is, which again, is what we needed in 1999 or 2000. I mean, for reference, see our Linkin Park episode. Like it's exactly in that vein. This is another record that, like Hybrid Theory, is really almost any song on it could be a single. And it's such a weird contrast from where the band came from. Just 2 years earlier with S.C.I.E.N.C.E, they sound like two totally different bands, but Make Yourself works. This is normally where I'm like, they were doing something really original on S.C.I.E.N.C.E, and now you listen to Drive and it's like this acoustic, like Wherever Tomorrow, and it's positive. I don't even know if there's any references to drugs on this album. They've sold out 1 out of 10 stars, would not buy again, total trash. But like, I don't believe that. The songs on this are too powerful. Like even last night I popped on Make Yourself, and I was trying to put myself back in the same mindset that I would have been in 1999. So I was playing Star Wars Episode 1 Racer on N64.
What, no Shadows of the Empire?
No, I wanted a game I could just focus on the music, so I put on the pod racing game, and I listened to Make Yourself, which I did very frequently back when this record came out.
Maybe you'll find what you need out in the junkyard then.
Yeah, and songs like Nowhere Fast. Really, that song, like I got actually a little emotional when I was listening to it because Brandon's lyrics are now relatable. They're not just like weird bad drug trips and, weirdness. So like Nowhere Fast, I remember being like 1999, 2000, being a kid and having that angst of like, what am I going to do with my life? Who am I going to become? What am I going to do when I get older? And it just feels like, am I ever going to get where I'm going? If I do, will I find out when I'm there? And so it's just interesting that, I had those questions as a child, but now as an adult, a lot of those questions have been answered. So it's kind of cool that I got to follow up, on some of those questions all these years later. So that song had a massive, it was my favorite song on the record whenever I first got it. And it's still up there, even though I hadn't listened to it in probably a decade, before we did this episode.
Yeah, I think, it's something I literally looked it up because usually I'm pretty stickler on knowing like production credits and so forth, like who worked on what and all that kind of stuff. And when you were like, oh, I don't know who worked on any of these records, I didn't either. But it's this dude, Scott Litt, and apparently he did this record and the next one we're going to talk about. But he was most known for working with REM and apparently had also done production duties on mixing Heart-Shaped Box and All Apologies from In Utero by Nirvana. So yeah, very much so. And then the other bands that he's worked with are like Liz Phair, Indigo Girls, Counting Crows, Days of the New, Get Up Kids. Like, so it's not like he doesn't really do anything in the space that Incubus kind of sits in. But when you kind of look at what he has worked on, you're kind of like, like maybe that's why it sounds the way it does. Like it has like a production that still sounds good all these years later.
Now that you mention that, the cosmetic similarities makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, like when I saw that, I was like, I do kind of hear a little bit more of his influence of what he does. Because before that, and it does say that Incubus basically produced this record with him, as I think they had pretty much everything they've done. They've always been pretty hands-on in the approach of how they make their music. But yeah, this record is, Jesus Christ, talk about nostalgia. I listened to this record quite a bit this week, and I Miss You comes on, and I still almost get like emotional because it reminded me of a mix CD that a ex of mine gave me, and this song was on it when we had first started dating. And when I got it, I think she had given it to me when we'd only been dating for like 2 weeks or so. I think, when I listened to it and I was thinking about getting that CD and the line in it, you've only been gone for 10 days, like it still brought me back to like at that point. I think like when she had given it to me, like we hadn't seen each other for a couple of days, and like the notes that she wrote in to accompany each song on the record, it was just kind of like, I don't think we talk about that sometimes, like how some of these bands, Joe talks about being a mixtape band and so forth, or a mixtape album. This is Prime making mix CDs, and I mean, even mixtapes to a degree, if we want to be really honest. And thinking about how some of these songs on this record really became ones we used to express how we felt to other people. Maybe you wanted kind of a chill, more acoustic thing. If you're going to hang out with your friends, I'm going to put Drive on. Oh, I'm going to make a mixtape.
Dude, I still play Drive at every single gig.
Right.
Regardless of the venue, because somebody wants to fucking hear it.
And it's one of those, like, and like Dan said, the even more introspective songs inside of this, Nowhere Fast, The Warmth, When It Comes, like, I Miss You, Out From Under. Like, there's just so many great songs on this fucking record that, like, I think even if this were to come out now, it still would have the impact that it did back then. But, if you were looking for the old band that was kind of more playful, that's gone. They're kind of more serious, and they are trying to be, I think, I should say they're trying to be less obtuse and more direct, and I think that really works for them on this. This is a great fucking record, start to finish. I don't know anyone in our age range that wouldn't agree. This is just full of bangers, start to finish.
Are we ready for Morning View?
Sure.
I think we are ready. Yeah, this is definitely the record where, we're going to start, feeling comfortable enough to share the music that we like with our girlfriends. You can't show your girlfriend Science. You might get away with like Anti-Gravity Love Song. You
can, but that weird girl that you dated probably that had dreads and you guys made out one night at a party
while listening to Stellar. Yeah.
Sure. She would be into it, but like, that's not the girl you're going to marry.
No.
That's the girl you put up on your shoulders during these shows. Your wife is going to be there with you, holding your hands and swaying all nice, almost like Axl Rose at the show.
Right.
I don't like this album.
Really? You don't like Morning View?
Final thoughts?
And Joe comes in hot.
So Incubus releases Make Yourself, and it is a masterpiece. It is one of those albums that, in my opinion, does not sound dated. You can still go back and listen to it, and I know it came out over 20 years ago, and it still works in every single way. Morning View, they had a big set of shoes to fill, and I remember reading in Guitar 1 during the release of A Crow Left of the Murder. Dude was not into writing these songs.
Talking about Mike?
Talking about Mike.
I remember that quote. I was going to mention it later.
And I bring it up now because these are songs that a lot of people point to and say these are the best songs. Talking about Wish You Were Here, talking about Nice to Know You. No matter how much I listen to this album, I just don't like the songs. And I think the first track is the most Incubus sounding song. The rest of it is a lot of minuscule experimentations that just don't pay off for me. And much like some movies where Dan, John, and my other friends step in and say, I don't think you fully understand what this is about because you still say you don't like it. I have tried so much to just sit and listen to Morning View and get it. I like Light Grenades more than I like this album. And most people do not like Light Grenades.
Oof.
It just doesn't click for me, and I don't know what I'm missing.
So this album is Drive, the album, in the sense that they were capitalizing very much on the success of Drive from Make Yourself as a single. These were the single, that was probably the single that did really, really well. I mean, all of us alternative rock junkies were like, yeah, Pardon Me, that was the single. And then Stellar was like, oh, that's a kind of a romantic sort of song, but it still sounds like, it still sounds like Incubus, But, yeah, I mean, initially I was disappointed with Morning View when I first heard it. But, back then, I didn't really get to buy CDs as often as I really wanted to. And so, I spent a lot of time with it. And you know how I've kind of described Incubus's early material as being like a bad acid trip? I feel like this album, it was a good one. It was that super chill, sort of thing where Brandon Boyd is going through some sort of spiritual journey. And you have a more chilled out, like more relaxed version of Make Yourself here. A lot of people say it's like a watered down Make Yourself. I mean, look, the cover, it's just water, right? But like I feel like there's still enough weirdness here, especially like if you look at like the song Echo most specifically, which it almost seems to have more of like a I don't know, almost like a Japanese kind of sounding, I could be being horribly like insensitive in saying that, but it's just, I don't know.
I would have accepted a Aqueous Transmission.
They had a song called Becoming Japanese. I know it wasn't their song, but still. But yeah, there was a lot of weird stuff. There's a lot of weird references to frogs and stuff in this. Like, it's just very strange. It's very strange. It's very kind of out of the box for them. The last song, Aqueous Transmission,
it's about time you talked
is
about
like
that song.
Incubus's final thought on what this record is supposed to be. And of course, it ends with like 3 minutes of frogs. But I really enjoy this record, and I still will put it on whenever I want to just kind of chill, like just zone out and relax. Which is ridiculous, right? Because most of my friends say I have literally no chill. But this record, I can get there eventually. The only song that I think kind of stands out as kind of weird is the song Blood on the Ground, where it's like kind of an angry song, like, I don't want to talk to you anymore, yada, yada, yada. But like, it's a little too, like, it's not heavy by any stretch of the imagination, which I think is kind of my problem with it. Like, it's an angry song, but it's on Morning View. So it's like, yeah, man, I'm really angry at you right now. So like, if you come to my house and do this very specific combination of things, and then I'm going to be angry at you, more angry at you, instead of like, I don't know, with a song title like Blood on the Ground, like that song always just does not make sense to me on this record. And I feel like it shouldn't have been on there. And then you go into Mexico, which is like a really, really sad song. I don't know. There's a lot of sadness, but a lot of like positivity. This is where Incubus is like, yeah, we could be a little bit more positive, right? I think the hardest part is that if you followed this band on their journey, this doesn't really make sense.
I would almost disagree with you. I think it makes total sense. Everything that we've been talking about with this band up until this album is basically that, like, they kind of are about a mood, a vibe, doing drugs, just kind of being free flowing. And what fits that vibe more than renting a house with your bandmates and basically just jamming and seeing what happens, and then basically creating music based on the isolation of being away from your loved ones while making a record, which I think, a song like 11 a.m. Really showcases. It's more introspective as a person who I think Brandon obviously is, like, deep in his own thoughts about, experiences and things that he's gone through. And I think with Make Yourself kind of proving that him writing from that perspective and style makes him more relatable than he had been previously, talking about abstract, weird shit. We'll get back there again in a couple of records.
Yeah, it never totally goes away.
No, it never totally goes away. But I think this is basically like them being a jam band and kind of doing, and this is going to be a weird reference for me. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's because it's more of a Joe comment, but it's almost like maybe their Pet Sounds, if that makes any sense. This is a record that, while there are a lot of singles on it, to me is one where you put it on and you just let it go until the whole way, because it's more about the vibe and the almost the emotional space it creates for you to, as a listener, to take on. This isn't one I typically go back to very often because of that. Like, it's a full album experience, not like I want to hear this song, I want to hear this song. But I love the kind of more chill ambientness of this record. I think Drive kind of opened them up to a lot of people. And like Dan said, I think a lot of people, when they listen to this, go, oh, this is the mainstream sellout album. For me, I think in sound approach, maybe. But I think when you're actually taking it all in, I honestly think it's a lot anti-mainstream based on some of the lyrical themes and some of the things they're doing. I mean, you look at a song like Aqueous Transmissions, and I don't really know that that's a mainstream song. I love it. I love how it's just very slow. It takes the space and time to get where it wants to go. Very much like we were saying on not Calgon, segue number 1 at the end of Science, where it is a thing that ends the record for 10 fucking minutes. I never felt like at any point during Aqueous Transmission, like, did any of that need to go away? It's a good way to end the album. It creates the vibe through and through that they had been trying to set. There's a couple of weird things. I think Blood on the Ground is kind of a weird song, but I like it. I think I'm more into the stuff that they're doing on this, where they're kind of being a lot more not adventurous, more chill, and kind of creating more textures on this record than before. To comment on Joe's comment about, Mike saying that he felt that the band hadn't been as adventurous as they had been. I think the record he actually mentioned was Science, which is weird. You were 2 records removed from it at this point. But he said that, he felt that, I think it was Science was the record. He was like, we were really adventurous. We were really pushing ourselves into different territories and so forth. And I felt like I hadn't done that. But that he said that he felt that way about the next record that we'll talk about. I do want to make a comment, though, real quickly, because on my iTunes, and for those watching, that's why I made the weird face. I'm learning all kinds of new things today about this band and so forth. But in the iTunes thing, it says, as soon as California polyglots, Incubus achieved mainstream success in the late 90s. And I was like, what the fuck is a polyglot? A polyglot is a person who knows and is able to use several languages, which I think is an interesting term and a phrase to use when talking about Incubus.
Definitely. That is weird. Well, all right, let's get to the album that Joe wants to talk about.
I'll give you another weird tidbit, John.
Okay.
So the pipa that Mike plays on Aqueous Transmission may or may not have been handed to him personally by Steve Vai.
Oh, that's cool.
Just a little tidbit there for you. 2004, A Crow Left of the Murder. So I remember the discussion being,
ooh, dual disc.
Will Incubus ever do the Make Yourself thing again? Even though I would argue that Morning View was the Make Yourself thing, only a little different. This was the first album that I ever heard online, streamed start to finish a week before it comes out. I don't remember the details, but Incubus is streaming their new album, A Crow Left of the Murder. Click this link and enjoy. And I sat there and listened to it. And I remember calling Dan saying, they're just doing Make Yourself again. This sounds like the first track on Morning View, but then they're not just laying back like they were doing on Morning View at the time. Because that was the perception, was Incubus was slowly descending into the laid-back elevator music, because that's what they'd seemed to be doing for the last album. This one, they turned it a little bit on its head. They're writing those heavy songs again, even though at the time I remember criticizing some of these riff ideas because they just sound like other versions of songs written for Make Yourself.
I think whenever I got that phone call, I was like, yeah, but you should seriously check out this album called Pray to Chaos by Zao. Because this literally was 2004 Dan called and said, listen to Zao. This is exactly that conversation. I'm going to be totally honest with you. So I heard Megalomaniac, right? And I thought that was a cool song, but I was kind of like, when did Incubus stop being like an atmosphere? Like they always had kind of this sci-fi tinge to their music that doesn't really exist here. And it didn't really exist on Morning View either. I was kind of like, when did they go from being this crazy band to being just this like regular rock band? So even though I think that Megalomaniac was a great single, this record, and this might be controversial, but this record really did nothing for me at all. And it's not even because I think it's bad. It's kind of like where Joe is with Morning View, where it's like I've listened to it a bunch of times because I've always been a big fan of the band, but for the most part, it just hasn't ever really hit the way it's hit for other people. And so the things that I will say about it is that it is more back to experimentation than Morning View. It sounds a little bit more like it should have come out after Make Yourself and transitioned into Morning View. I like that the songs don't all have the same vibe. I think that's one of the things that you can look at with Make Yourself and Morning View and feel like, okay, these songs all kind of follow the same pattern, the same vibe. This record seems more like just a collection of songs, more so than a collective whole. But I think that's good because it does give you much needed variety in a band that has kind of sounded similar to itself for the past couple of releases. But from my perspective, it's kind of like, yeah, but this is Incubus, and I don't understand why it doesn't sound like S.C.I.E.N.C.E, because sometimes I'm that guy. And I just want to hear S.C.I.E.N.C.E, and it's fine. S.C.I.E.N.C.E exists. I can go listen to it anytime I want to, But I think that my expectation of them going back to that sound was more or less off base. And so, unfortunately, spoilers, there's really nothing that this band has been able to do since maybe a couple of songs on this record that is really going to get me excited or wanting to check the band out. But because I was such a fan early on, I still check out every release as it comes out. waiting for the day where they're like, yeah, let's just do the S.C.I.E.N.C.E thing again. They're not going to do it, but if they did, I want to make sure I heard it.
Best thing you're going to get is the band playing live.
Yeah, and that's one thing I like about Incubus is when they play live, they still play all the hits. So can't go wrong there.
Yeah, for me, this is hot take. This is my favorite record of the band's. I saw them on this album cycle, and it was weird because they're supposed to have an opener, and then it was DJ Gilmore scratching and playing songs for like 35 minutes, and then basically Incubus played for like 2.5 hours, and it was really fucking cool. They did a bunch of like weird segues, like, you know, I think they still do them where it's like Jose has like a drum thing, then Brandon will come out and play some like hand bongos and so forth. Michael will kind of do a guitar solo.
I'm
DJ
really glad that Brandon still does the djembe thing.
Yeah. Djembe Mutombo, it's my favorite.
Yeah.
But this is a record I really like. I think, like Dan said, it sees the band kind of experimenting a little bit more. You know, I think you take like a song, even like Beware Criminal is kind of, the way it starts off even kind of has more of that like make yourself kind of vibe to it. I just kind of love I don't want to call it vulnerability, but like the aggression. Like, I think I texted Dan earlier this week and I was like, this is Brandon kind of as aggressive as he was on the beginning records, but not outwardly, like as far as how the vocals are done, but in a lyrical sense. This is a very aggressive record. You look at a song like Sick Sad Little World, Beware Criminal, Talk Shows on Mute, you know, we're getting more into social commentary. Obviously, this is during the Bush administration. That's what, you know, Megalomaniac was about, very honestly, even in video presentation. You know, this is the first record without Lance Dirk, their bass player, but they got Ben Kinney, who's coming right off of the Roots doing Phrenology, which, you know, catapulted the Roots into the mainstream. And I remember, and the only reason I'm bringing up the Roots connection is because on Phrenology, there's a really extensive liner notes on that record, and there's a punk song. It's like, I think it's like literally 56 seconds long or something like that. And in it, I think Questlove had made the comment that Ben had been pushing the band to try to do something punk, that they hadn't really done anything like that. And so that was the byproduct of Ben Kinney's influence on, you know, that song and on that record. So I was really excited to see what Ben was going to bring to the band, because knowing that he obviously can fit in rhythm section wise, it wasn't in doubt, but it was more of what is he going to help bring to the band? Where is he going to push the band to kind of go potentially behind the scenes? And I think you kind of get a little bit more of that on the first half of the record, where there's a little bit more of the older quote unquote aggression that the band kind of had been missing on. It's just not maybe in the same sense that we were expecting it to be, like a Pardon Me kind of style or something. But I think there's you know, as Dan was kind of saying, like, oh, that 6 seconds on Science or whatever basically would point to where they were moving on Morning View, or on Morning View.
Make yourself.
Make yourself, sorry. But going into so it was one of those where, to me, like, as I was listening back to this record and Southern Girl comes on, I was like, that kind of points a little bit more toward where we're about to go with this band moving forward. I just didn't realize it at the time, but to me, this is just a fun record. I love the singles. I love just the whole concept of this record, and not really that it is a concept record, but just that it's, to me, the best iteration we're going to get of old Incubus, with kind of the Morning View kind of style thrown in, the more kind of light and airy version. This was the best marriage of those two that I think we'll ever see. And to me, this is basically where I kind of would say I got off, because moving forward, there's just nothing really there for me. Although, Joe, if you want to introduce the next record.
2006, Light Grenades.
So they really fucking got me, because lead single Animali comes out and I'm like, oh my god, we're really picking right back up where Crow Left of the Murder left off. And then you get the record and you're like, oh wait, no we're not.
No, we are not, John.
That was the Trojan horse that got you in.
Well, don't you get it, John? It's the anomaly of the album.
Yeah. And
I love Incubus, and I always want Incubus to be that band that I remember, but they do a really good job of never doing that again. Until we get to Crow Left of the Murder, like you said, I remember describing that album as, this is Make Yourself and Morning View just thrown together, and the good parts make this album. Now you get Light Grenades, where it doesn't sound like a band who plays together well. It sounds like a band that jams to write their songs. And I make the distinction of science sounds like good players working together. This sounds like, all right, guys, let's just jam and see what happens. And personally, I've been there a lot. Many musicians can start writing good songs, but finishing good songs, that's a skill. That's a talent. And I don't think Incubus is knocking it out of the park on this one, which says something about what I said about Morning View earlier.
I appreciate your guys' subtlety, but this album just sucks. It's just such a far cry from what the band was and what their potential was, like what their potential could be. I'm with John. I thought Animali was cool and is probably the most like immediate, intense feeling on the record.
Time out for a second. As I'm looking up the era of this record and who produced it and so forth, I completely forgot about this song. But this is another song that was not on this record, which I'd say about what you will. Make a Move, because remember when they did almost the whole soundtrack for Stealth? That shit movie? And so between Make a Move and then Animali, I was like, man, they're kind of going back to an aggressive, like, overall sound. I forgot about Make a Move, but like that also, as you're saying, like we got duped. Like that was the 1-2 punch of like, oh, they're going back to the old Incubus, like kind of aggressive, more make yourself kind of style vibe, and then just totally shit the bed.
Yeah, I don't like using words like garbage, and terrible, but like, and again, like objectively, it's not terrible in the sense that like they get a little aggressive on the song Light Grenades and stuff, like, but like none of their moves to be aggressive and noisy, because like I appreciate that they try to be kind of noisy on this record in places, but overall it just falls flat. It sounds very thin, very flat, and like granted Boyd's trying as hard as he can vocally, but it's just not hitting. Like these Light Grenades are duds. It just is what it is. The reason they're so light is because they don't actually have anything in them, and they're not going to explode. They're just going to land. They're just going to plump right there on the ground. And I remember just listening to it being like, Incubus is dead. Like, I mean, just 100%. Like, they're just much like George Lucas in the Star Wars movies lost sight of what made them appealing. And I realize that's hard as an artist, because as an artist, you want to always be pushing yourself to do more, And this is not all that different. The trajectory isn't all that different than what Linkin Park's was, in that they were always trying to redefine, no pun intended, or maybe it is, but they were always trying to push themselves and do something different and something cool. And at some point, I feel like they just kind of lost track of what that was, and kind of forgot what the point was. Because I think they more or less they kind of went on a hiatus after this, because I think they were burned out.
Mike had carpal tunnel and needed surgery on his hands.
Well, there's that too. I didn't know that, but yeah, because I wasn't really following them. I mean, after Light Grenades, I was like, I'm not going to follow this band, like whatever. Like I'll listen to their records when they come out, but beyond that, I'm pretty much out. I don't know.
You're not in anymore?
Yeah, man. It's so much better when everybody's in, but I wasn't in. And that's all I really have to say about it. It's just really not a great record, but they haven't done like anything terrible yet.
2011. If not now, when?
Yeah, now it's kind of like you guys took a bunch of time off, and then you came back and gave me this.
Yes, Dan, they did that to you.
It's something they've done to me personally. I knew it. I don't even know what they were thinking on this one. Like this is slow, boring. Even if your favorite album was Light Grenades, you'd find this boring. Like it makes Light Grenades sound like a death metal record in comparison. Like it
makes Light Grenades sound like an Incubus album.
Almost like an Incubus album. Yeah. This is just, I have no idea what to say about this, and there's nothing objectively that I can say about it that would make anybody feel happy. And I'm not even sorry. Like I don't know why this was released. It clearly doesn't sound done. It's a whole bunch of half-baked ideas. It's slow. It's boring. I've listened to it 8 times and I can't remember a single hook or melody off of this record. Like at some point the well has to run dry, and you've got to stop just drinking cups of air and telling everybody it's really good water.
I feel like the hard thing with this record is it just feel like it's trying too hard to be something. And that's the thing. I don't know what the something is. Like where we've lauded Brandon for his vocals, I feel like on this, like they're just so trite. I mean, like Promises, promises. You're like, all right, like whatever. And like even a song like Switchblade, I feel like that really encompasses kind of what I'm saying, or what we're probably all going to say, where it's like you listen to that and you're like, are you trying to kind of like make like a quote unquote heavier for this record song? And just, I don't know, like there's just nothing about this record where I think like I didn't listen to it 8 times. I think I made it through twice, and like I was listening to it when I was driving, and it was so lackluster and uninspired. I honestly at times didn't know if a song had ended and another one started until I looked down and I was like, oh, I was on this one. Now I'm on like 3 others. And it almost follows, what was the band that I joked that like, oh, you'll always know the song title because they fucking say it ad nauseum. Oh, Death. You'll always know the Death song that you're listening to because they say it ad nauseum. And I feel like where we never had really had that happen with Incubus, that's like all he does on this fucking record is like every song title he says a bunch. And you're like, what happened to the Brandon Boy that was like way more like virtuosic with your words and your phrasings and so forth? Like just nothing inspired about this record.
So I just spent 90 seconds doing research. Everywhere I look, this album is labeled soft rock.
It almost feels this almost, I think the word I came up with earlier was like, this feels like adult contemporary music. Like the shit that you could play at your work, your office, and be like, oh, I'm listening to the new Incubus. And people would be like, I like Incubus. And they probably are thinking Morning View.
Yeah, I mean, he had more vocal variety, and like he sounds like a pro on Fungus Among Us compared to this. And I don't know, it's like one of the most phoned in vocal performances I've ever heard. And why wouldn't he phone it in after hearing the music? You know, there comes a certain point as a vocalist where you're like, I can't save this. You know, like there's nothing I can do with this. And they come back a couple years later and they absolutely try to save it.
2017, 8.
Who else got duped by Nimble Bastard? Thinking again, we were going to have like an anima. But see, that was the weird thing. Nimble Bastard came out and I remember going like, you fooled me 2 albums ago.
Nimble Bastard doesn't even fool you that hard. The album starts with No Fun.
No, but I'm saying Nimble Bastard was the first single. So when I heard that and then basically hearing that, you know, Skrillex was going to be co-producing this record or whatever, I was like, okay, like maybe it'll have like some harder edge to it again.
Oh God, you triggered Joe.
Well, that might
He'd
be
just
the
be dropping the Skrillex bomb on him like that.
Well, just I don't know. Like I at least feel like there's a sense of I don't want to say energy or urgency with this because that definitely is not the case. But it feels like they're trying to recapture A Crow Left of the Murder at this point. Like those vibes.
It really bothers me the way Brandon Boyd's enunciation changes over time, and I really don't know if that's he's getting older and he just can't do the thing anymore. But it's like he progressively opens his face more as the discography goes on, and this one sounds so happy to be here.
I think that this is a way, way better record than the last one, but it's still not a good Incubus record. They haven't put a good Incubus record out since A Crow Left with a Murder. And even that one, I would be like, yeah, it was okay, you know? And like, maybe it's just we're not being fair or whatever, or we don't have enough appreciation. But like, at the end of the day, like, why do I not have patience for a record like 8? Because there's a billion other mainstream rock bands that sound exactly like this. And the reason I started listening to Incubus is because they were special to me. They were different. They provided a different experience. They provided their certain shade of Incubus, right? And that's all gone. That's been gone for 3 records. And I wonder if it's just that, like, when you're first starting out, you're young, you're idealistic, and you just think to yourself, like, I want to get discovered for the uniqueness that I have. And then once you get discovered, it becomes your job, and you just tour, and then you write albums, and you tour. And like at some point, these records just feel like, yep, I clocked in today at 8 o'clock and clocked right out at 4:30, not 4:31. Didn't go the extra mile. Didn't come in on Saturday. Didn't put the extra effort into it. And it's very paint by numbers pop rock music. And that's not what I got into Incubus for. I'm sorry. And in my opinion, doesn't matter. If they're still rocking it in the album sales department, then more power to them. But I don't enjoy it.
You don't enjoy Incubus anymore?
I don't.
Well, Dan, we're going to end the show with Crowded Elevator. Don't worry.
Oh, fair enough.
Final thoughts on Incubus. John.
I think they were a band that that really excited a lot of us, and we have a lot of nostalgia attached to certain eras of the band. I think the unfortunate thing is for some of us, and I'm sure the people that'll comment on this will let us know, for some, growing with the band didn't equate to good music. It kind of equated to bad sellout music, lackluster music. We liked the band when it seemed like they were more energized and focused on being unapologetically who they were, not who they become, where they're resting on the laurels of what they did 10, 15, 20 years ago. I guess 20 years ago at this point. And it sucks. I mean, like Dan said, I want to like Incubus. I want to, when the records come out, I want to be excited to hear something. But unfortunately, they've now are that band where they almost have as much bad output as they did good. And unfortunately, it's not really a band that I think, like a lot of the new metal that we talk about, quote unquote, starts off one way, ends completely differently. I don't know that any band ever stays new metal throughout their career. Maybe Limp Bizkit's the only one. Maybe that's what we'll find.
Dan, what about you?
Well, I think Incubus was a really great band. And I don't think they're a bad band now. It's not like they're like playing bad notes or doing anything offensive or weird. But I kind of liked them when they were more offensive and weird, you know? And they were a formative band for me. So it's hard. It's hard to kind of take that in. But it just is what it is. And like they're fine now, but definitely a band you should check out the first 2 or 3 releases and you can pretty much move on unless you're just really into paint by numbers pop rock music.
I want everyone listening to this podcast to listen to as much old Incubus as you can. Find Fungus Among Us, find Science, find Enjoy Incubus, and When Incubus Attacks Volume 1. Then I want you to listen to Make Yourself, because that's the band that I think everyone fell in love with. Everybody wants that band. I think Make Yourself is an acceptable departure from that old school funk influenced insanity. And even though Morning View is not for me, it's not the worst album this band put out. I'm with John. I like Grenades sometimes, but A Crow Left of the Murder is basically where I jump off. And unfortunately, I can't fault anybody for feeling the same way. I can't fault anybody for listening to one specific Incubus album and that's it. Because I think the recent output from the band is very focused. I don't know why Incubus had to go soft rock, but I also don't have to listen to that album. So if you're a fan of everything, there's something here for you because Incubus plays everything. Dan, what's your album of the week?
Well, you know, I just couldn't get off of that E-Town Concrete fix. So I'm still rocking The Second Coming by E-Town Concrete.
John, what about you?
I am going with The Armed ULTRAPOP.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's really good. Detroit dudes doing it up.
For me, it's Incubus, Science, because I don't need an excuse to listen to Incubus, Science. You're welcome. Enjoy. Take us out, DFT.
If you guys have been listening to or watching this podcast and would like to reach out to us for any reason that you have, good, bad, indifferent, business proposals, whatever you got, you can reach out to us in a variety of places, one of which would be our Facebook page at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can also find us on Twitter at discussmetal. You can find us on Instagram at discussmetal. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. And you can also join our Discord server. There'll be a link down below that'll take you right to our Discord server where ourselves, as well as fans of the show, are talking pretty much all the time. It's getting to the point where I almost can't keep up with all of it, which is fantastic. That's a problem that you want to have. And if you want to check out some of our sweet merch, we have a Teespring store set up where you can put a variety of items on your body that have our logo emblazoned all over them. So, yeah, if you want to support the show financially, you can absolutely do that. If you go to patreon.com and search for Discuss Metal, we have some pretty cool perks in there, including Patreon Hangouts, where we just chill and talk about music with you guys on screen, like we're doing right now. So definitely a perk. We review albums every single week. We do hidden episodes of discography discussion. So there's all kinds of cool stuff in that Patreon camp if that's something that you want to do. So thank you guys so much for checking this out, and we will see you on the next episode.
And on that note, this has been episode 221 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me that sweet, sweet coin.
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.